The time is just gone 8:36 a.m. and we're going across now to be joined by Professor Shahida Wizarat, and she is with the Institute of Business Management, Karachi, and also Dean CESD. Professor Shahida, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And thank you for having me.
Yes, wonderful having you with us. Jummah Mubarak to you, and great that you are able to join us. Now, obviously, the key question here is Pakistan. Where does Pakistan find itself in? Who does Pakistan align itself to? Now, there are a number of issues that we can talk about. Obviously, looking at the West, looking at Western institutions, IMF, World Bank, which is a one issue. And looking at Pakistan, should they align themselves to the West? Should they align themselves to China? We know that there is a lot that is taking place between Pakistan and China. So, just your thoughts initially, Dr. Shahida.
Actually, thank you very much for having me, and Jummah Mubarak to you also. Uh, I think with regard to this question, I'd just like to state that for the last 75 years almost, we've been aligned with Western countries, United States and UK. And I think that for the last so many years, I think it's time to do an evaluation of our relationship. What have we got from the West, and what do we expect to, and what are we getting from the region, and what can we expect from the two groups in future? So, if you look at our relationship with the West for the last 75 years almost, we feel that it's a relationship that has been abused a lot, first of all. Um, and the other thing is, I'll talk about them in detail in a little while, but also the fact that for the last 75 years, when we joined this group, after we became a so-called sovereign country, uh, we joined the typical Santo, Seattle, and we joined the United Nations, and we joined all the international financial institutions. And in the beginning, we started getting some development, um, because at that time, these financial institutions also had a different mandate. Their mandate was to provide financing for projects in developing countries, and these developing countries had just been born. They were newly born countries, and that is why some of us benefited from the project-based lending that was started in the early years. But over time, a feeling was created in the West that developing countries, their industrialization is causing deindustrialization in the advanced industrial countries. And after that, we find that um, the rules of the game were changed. For example, instead of giving project-based lending, the international financial institutions started giving policy-based lending, which meant that they started dictating policies. They started telling us what policies to adopt and what policies not to adopt. And we also had Pakistanis working for the international financial institutions. They were sent as finance ministers, as prime ministers, as commerce ministers to come and rule us. So that was really going back to the colonial times. And then and after that, we find that we did not get any development. On the contrary, our growth rate started declining. Poverty started increasing. In fact, there was massive increase in poverty in Pakistan in the 1990s. And again, because we were borrowing heavily from the international financial institutions, particularly the International Monetary Fund. And the World Bank was also playing the role of a godfather in many of the foreign investment projects. And they were taking care of the interests of the advanced countries, Western countries, rather than Pakistan. For example, if you look at our IPPs, IPPs were negotiated during the 1990s when the World Bank was acting as a godfather. And we find that at that time, they got Pakistan into agreements which were not in Pakistan's interests. And obviously, what has happened with regard to the IMF, we all know that ever since we've started borrowing from the IMF, Growth rates have declined. Employment levels have gone down very badly. Industries have closed down. There have been massive deindustrialization in Pakistan. This distribution of income has worsened. Poverty levels have increased. So, whereas if you look at compare the performance of these industrialized countries with towards the West, for example, after the Second World War, when there was total devastation in Europe and Japan, because there was, as a result of the war, their infrastructure had been devastated. But we find that when these countries, because of the Marshall Plan, the West was able to develop them within 4 5 years, and they were back on their feet. So one wonders, why is it happening that developing countries, including Pakistan, or even for the last 75 years, they have not been able to develop. And in fact, development is leading to a lot of serious problems, economic problems, political problems, socio-political problems, whereas the West was able to develop Europe and Japan within a few years. And so much so that from the early 1950s till the early 1970s, they had this glorious golden age which brought in a lot of prosperity to Europe. But one wonders why we are unable to develop even 75 years after independence. So this is, I summarized what I wanted to summarize on the economic front. But if you look at our politics, they have abused this relationship tremendously. For example, in the garb of friendship, they have been hurting us. They have been patronizing Pakistani politicians who have brought about a lot of political problems for Pakistan. Things like target killings and kidnapping for ransom, and they have patronized those Pakistani politicians who have destabilized Pakistan, Karachi, Balochistan, and they have been patronizing them. And apart from that, they also abused the relationship during the war against terror. They they were complicit in the attack on the army public school at Damadola, and they, in the garb of friends, they have been shooting down our soldiers because they are not exactly our friends. So I am. So you see, whether you look at the politics or the socio-political factors or the economics, we find that the West has not treated us like friends. They have abused this relationship, and now, after 75 years, when we feel that we are like a slave that is about to get freedom, then they are back again demanding that the GLOC and the OLOC, the routes that they used in the past, that they want those routes back. So I think that it is very unfair to treat us like this and to abuse our relationship as friends, to destabilize us, to harm us politically, socially, and economically.
Yes, Dr. Chaida, you've said so much, and obviously it raises so much more discussion. But obviously, we unfortunately have run out of time. There are still so many issues. I want to talk about the geopolitical issues, obviously, and because this also would determine where Pakistan should be heading to. There's the issue about China, the alignment to the east as well. And can I hold you, Dr. Shahida Wizarat, to a follow-up program on this? Because I don't think we're going to do justice in a matter of few minutes on this topic. So inshallah, very, very soon, I will advise my producer to get in touch with you, because there are many other issues, and I don't think at this point in time, rushing through this discussion, that we're going to be doing justice to what you have written in this amazing article, I must say, which is entitled Should Pakistan Head East or West? So inshallah, looking forward to very, very soon to do a follow-up on this particular article that you've written, inshallah.
Thank you very much, and I would love to participate in any future discussion. Thank you for having me.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa
Jazakallah.
rahmatullah.